Welcome back to the About Our Father's Business podcast. Today we have Michael Johnson on the show. I actually met Michael just by grabbing a cup of coffee at his coffee shop in Overland Park. We started talking. He started listening to the podcast. Recently, he joined the men's Bible study that I lead every Wednesday morning, which we still have a few openings for. So if you're interested, reach out to me. This guy knows his Bible. You guys are in for a treat. Not only does he have this amazing story to share with his faith and how he came to Christ, but also how he went from working and really leading big name nonprofits in Kansas City to then owning his own coffee shop and then selling it. Without further ado, Michael Johnson, my friend, and soon to be yours. Mr. Michael Johnson.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Thank you so much for coming on the show. We're going to get straight into it. We're going to start with the most important question. How did you come to your faith in Christ?
You know, it's kind of interesting when I was thinking about that. You asked me that question. I'm like, my journey has been maybe atypical or typical, depending on who you talk to. So as a kid, I grew up going to church. And mom and dad made it a point of going to church. My grandma, if I went and spent the day with her, I went to church. And I kind of did it because I was supposed to do it. And as I was sitting there going to church, it was an act that I had to do. And then I go to church and then they say, hey, we're going to Youth for Christ. You want to go? Sure. What the heck? You know, so I went. And I'm like enjoying it. I'm having fun. And they did the altar call kind of thing. And I'm like, I think I want to go up there. I go up and then the guy's talking to me and, you know, just making sure I knew what I was doing and things like that. And in my head, I kept thinking, I'm going to miss my bus. I'm going to miss my bus. So I didn't really, again, know what I was doing. I wasn't doing what I should have been doing. And I went forward because I saw people around me going forward. And I thought, oh, I'm supposed to do this too. So just like go to church. Oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. So I go up front. Oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. Oh, and I get a cool Bible on the way out. Even better. So I did that for a while. And then I started realizing with a buddy of mine, he asked me to go to church with him instead of my parents. And I started to have a different appreciation for church. I'm not saying that churches should make a difference, but I think when your church is spirit-led, I think it's really important to go to churches that teach out of the Bible and do those types of things and having friends around you who are also talking about those things. But then I started to realize when I was going there, I was going for the friends. I wasn't going for church. And I really did this a lot of my life. And if you asked me when I was a kid, are you a Christian? Yeah. You know, oh, where do you go to church? I go here. Okay. Oh, same thing a little bit later in life, 21, 22. If I was down in Westport and they said, where do you go to church? I'd be like having a beer and saying, oh, this is where I go. Are you a Christian? Yeah. Oh, you're drunk. Yeah, I am. It's like, so, and I'm making this story to tell you that, ultimately something clicked and part of it came probably 15, 20 years ago. All of a sudden something clicked. I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And I realized that I wasn't really following Christ. I wasn't living a Christ-like life. I was doing things by rote. And that's when I started to get a little bit more serious and started looking at the Bible and reading it a little bit more and getting into it and starting to talk to people other than just this core group of friends that I had. And I started to realize, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And then I started feeling God in a way that was a little bit different. He actually started to talk to me through other things, it felt like. And I think, that started to affirm, and I don't think you should look for physical things to affirm your faith, but I think he was like starting to share things and saying, hey, these people I'm putting in your life for a reason. I started to come to Christ at a point that I was older. I was already married, already had kids, and I was still going to church, doing all the right things. But I started to realize at that point that was more important. So having the altar call at that point was more important to me because I realized finally what it really meant. So it was much later in life. Even though I lived a Christian life, I didn't actually live a Christian life until about 15 years ago.
What kind of church did you go to when you were growing up?
So we went to a Methodist church, and my grandma went to a Baptist church, Southern Baptist church. So two kind of different approaches.
Yeah.
And but And my mom grew up in that. My dad grew up in the other, so he went where your dad went. And it was fine. I mean, I even went through the class, I know every book of the Bible. Woohoo, I did it. You had to, and then I got sprinkled there too. I had that going for me. I said I did all those things. And but in my heart, I still know that I didn't do those things for the right reasons. And so that's kind of where we landed. So then I moved on in more evangelical types of churches. But my buddy, he went to a church that was, I don't know if we talk about different churches in the area, but West Side is where he went to. And that's when I finally started going, oh, this is a little bit different. Okay, this is, you stand when they're singing. The 35-minute, 40-minute sermons. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm used to hey, we're going to read this little piece here. We're going to go over here. We're going to do the opening messages. We're going to have a 12.5-minute sermon. If he goes to 13, you're like, hey, he's talking way too much. And I went from this band up front to 35, 40-minute sermons. I'm like going at the end, I was like, oh, it's already over. And so again, that was awakening. I think it was helping me understand what was going on, and God was moving in the world in ways that I wasn't aware of and wasn't really paying attention to. And I'm not saying sermons do that. Guys don't do that. God does that, and the Holy Spirit does that.
So was there a moment 15 years ago that you remember that woke you up?
I think there's several. That's the problem. That's what I said. My journey wasn't like very specific. There's things I started paying attention to, and I think those are the things that worked. There was the original coffee shop that Revo Cup was on College in Quivira for a long time. And there would be guys doing a Bible study. And then I'm walking by and then I hear this like, Ephesians, talk to those guys about Ephesians. Get in my car and I'm like, yeah, right. I'm not going to go talk to guys I don't know about Ephesians. And I'm like, one day I finally said, you know what? I'm going to do that. And I went in, talked to him, and I go, oh, that's actually what we're studying right now. And if you want, you can join us. And I'm like, well, I'm actually going to work. And I really didn't know what I was going to do here, but I just wanted to mention that. And I think getting confirmation, talking to people and visiting with people, I think those are the things that kind of made a difference to me. I started, again, just paying attention to God moving in the world in a way that my eyes were pretty closed for a long time. And so I know some people have those moments. It's like, oh, I walked in and here it was. And mine was just this gradual kind of growth. And maybe that's just who I am. I'm kind of slow-witted, so it takes me a while to get to that point of saying, oh, this is what it's all about. Okay, it took me all those years to get to this point, started paying attention. Now I kind of get it. And now for the last several years, it's been a different story. I've been paying attention. I've been having conversation with people. I'm being what God wants me to be.
So after you really started kind of reading the Bible, taking that seriously, and why was it important to you to start behaving differently?
Being married, 2 kids. So being married, and to share part of the story that you're probably not fully aware of, is my wife, when we got married, is not Christian. So all I cared about at the time, again, kind of speaking to kind of where my heart was, well, you believe in God. So at least you believe in God. I can do my thing, you do your thing. But then, and we agreed when we got married, the girls would be brought up in the church because that's kind of what I did. She goes, well, that's your thing. Go ahead and do it. And for me, I was like, I need to be a dad and I need to show them kind of why it's important and how to live that life. So for me, that's when it started becoming more and more important. And then also to be that for my wife and to be an example for her too. And so both of those things probably are what did a lot of it. So
yeah, it's always interesting to hear people's different stories and how they really had their awakening.
Yeah,
I had mine. I know that, but what really rings for me is just Paul talking about. I think it's in Corinthians where he says he essentially has to make sure that he's disciplining his body and making it his slave, so then when he preaches to others that he himself doesn't become disqualified.
Yeah.
And like you said earlier in this conversation is, hey, I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
And I'm at Westport and I'm drunk.
Exactly. Stumbling home.
Yeah, exactly. Which, I mean, the whole alcohol issue, that's, that's debatable or, it's just, in my opinion, it's just hard to really tell somebody about the holiness of God when, essentially we're getting really close to sinning. So I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you with kids and the wife, and really just being a good representative of Christ. Yeah. So as we kind of shift gears here, how did you become the owner of Revo? Is it Revo? Revo Coffee Shop.
Revo Cup Coffee. So that came about, that conversation that I had with those Christians that were talking about Ephesians came from the original Revo Cup in Kansas City, which was on College and Covera. I used to go in there quite a bit because in the old days, this is several years ago now, they had dollar grab-and-go coffee. So you go in, I just drink black coffee. That's all I needed. I'd walk in, you drop $1 in a bucket, and you walk on. I don't have to wait in line to get all these fancy drinks because I didn't really care about it. So the more I started visiting with the owner, he started to share a vision that he had to help coffee growers in third world countries. And it was in part due to a foundation that he set up. And he goes, I'd love for your help on the foundation, because he knew at the time I was in a nonprofit. I worked in the nonprofit world for many years. And he goes, maybe you can help me. I'm like, yeah, sure. So it went from just drinking $1 cup of coffee to helping him with his foundation to help it grow into something a little bit more, and focusing in on 3 things, talking about really educational needs, helping out healthcare needs, talking about microloans. And we started out with libraries, things along that sort. Well, as I got more and more engaged with them, I started to realize, I can do more things than just continue to work in a corporate world. And then as my faith was really starting to accelerate, I said, the challenge that you face in corporate world, in a lot of places anyway, is the ability to talk about your faith with people. You have to be real selective in who you talk to, especially me managing people. I can't talk to my employees about faith without them bringing it up first. Mm-hmm. And so I was realizing that, well, if I start a coffee shop, now I'm kind of fulfilling the ability to talk about my faith. I can be a mentor to several people. I can make a difference in the world. I started listing all the positives. So I went to my wife and I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And she goes, well, who are you going to do this with? Because you know nothing about coffee. And I go, well, except for my black cup of coffee that I got. I said, well, Hopti's going to help me. She goes, well, if he's involved, okay, I'm behind it. And I'm like, okay, let's make this thing happen. And so I went and talked to him, and about a year later, we opened up our first store. And so that store now has been open almost 10 years now, 9.5 years. And he, on the flip side of that, ended up closing his store because of the landlord. So we kind of moved into his place and continued the store for a while by ourselves. A lot of his customers came to me. But it really came organically with what my desire was. I was tired of being in a corporate setting. I worked 67-hour work weeks every single week for someone else. And I said, I want to do this for myself. If I'm going to work that hard, I might as well build something I can be proud of. And, I was blessed to have a wife who actually had a job so she could pay the bills while, the first year or two you make virtually no money. And you're allowing it to kind of grow. And it grew organically, and it grew at a sustainable rate. And it continues to grow to this day. We've never had a year, even during COVID, where we were down more than 10, or we were up 10 to 15% every single year, even during COVID. Our sales continued to grow. And to me, that meant what I was doing and why I was doing it actually was God kind of touching it and saying, hey, you're doing the right thing. Just keep doing it. And he blessed me through that period of time where other coffee shops closed completely. So long answer. It was basically those things. So I'm working this hard. I want to enjoy what I'm doing.
Where were you working before?
So I worked in the nonprofit world. So I worked at KU. I was director of development for the KU Cancer Center. I worked at Cerner in charge of I wasn't in charge, but I worked really closely with their foundation that they had prior to the sale. So Cerner was around, here locally. And then I went from there to Children's Mercy, and I worked there for a few years. And then I moved to the Nelson and worked there for about a year, realizing that wasn't a perfect fit because the Nelson is a phenomenal place, great asset to the city, but people weren't giving for all the reasons that I wanted people to give for, which was healthcare kind of related, altruistic kinds of attitude. Several of them were, but some of them just like, where's my name going? And for me, that it's fine. They're making a difference, and people are seeing some things that they couldn't have access to. But then so I left. That was short lived, about a year and a half, and I went over to UMKC knowing that I was going to be setting up a coffee shop. And I told them, this is what I want to do for a short period of time, and they're fine with it. So, So nonprofit for another 10, 15 years.
You've had a presence everywhere around here.
Yeah, I can keep going.
So were you
Bring the resume.
Were you responsible for essentially raising capital and donations, contributions?
So like at KU, working there, director of development for the KU Cancer Center. At that time, I was raising money both for the hospital and the university, and raising money for research, raising money for patient care, raising money for capital, raising money for endowed positions, anything and everything. If someone wanted to give $10, I talked to them. If someone wanted to give $1 million, $10 million, talk to them. And, you just continue to move forward, because I personally am a cancer survivor. So for me, that was really important to kind of see the impact of those dollars and where they could be utilized, and understanding the benefit of having a great nurse, but also understand the benefit of having research done on a continual basis for cancer research.
What's the secret to getting people to write that check?
That's an interesting question. I think for me, I never had to convince people to give the money. I just talked about the need. And the focus, even on thank you notes, I heard a long time ago, you write a thank you note that says, I want to thank you for making a difference in the world. And a lot of notes say, I want to thank you for your $10 or whatever. You can start it out by, you changed the world today. And then people are, what's this? And then they actually read your thank you note and you talk about the difference. We were very transparent. I said, every dollar you give us at KU goes 100% to the program. You're not paying my salary. You're not paying overhead. You're not doing any of that. So that also helped incentivize people. You had grateful patients that came along and said, my nurse was phenomenal, and I want to do more to help them. I know that they're limited in what they can have. You have people who say, I don't want anyone to go through the same pain and suffering I did, and I want to fund research. We want to make Kansas City a hub for NCI-designated cancer center. And how can we make that happen? I talked to the ultra rich, and I said, I need you so that I can talk to this guy as well in conjunction with you, so that they can make a transformational gift, something that's going to change this world. So it was more about letting them know that your dollars make a difference. And because they're already talking to you, they know what my position is. Like, oh, you're director of development? Oh, are you going to talk about the weather? You're going to do this? Are you going to do that? No. So
you're here to get my money.
And one guy even told me that, and that kind of woke me up to that too. And he goes, Michael, I know what you're doing. He goes, I know who you are. I know why you're here. I've talked to some people here that were ultra wealthy, and he goes, Michael, you know what I need. Just put it on paper and send it to me, and I'll take care of you. So some people it's very easy. Others, it's harder to get a $10 gift sometimes than it is $1 million gift. Yeah. It's like, $10. I don't know. I'm kind of strapped right now. I'm like, anyway. So,
So is there something to getting on the phone and just making as many calls as possible?
No, for my world, it wasn't. I kind of came from the sales world, and a lot of what we did was, cold calls. Mine was all relationships, building relationships with people in this community and building relationships with other people. I'd go, if you were giving me money for whatever, a dollar amount, who else should I talk to that has the same passion as you? Who else do you think would want to do something like this? Okay, these are leaders in the community. Do you think any of them would be interested? Because ultimately you have to have the ability and the connection to the cause that you're raising money for. Yeah. So some people just give, I'm going to give you $25,000 just because you're doing good things. But I could care less about cancer per se. They do, but they're not invested. Others say, no, I got the ability and the affinity here to make a difference. And those two things are the key to almost everything that you do. So just because you have a great product doesn't necessarily mean that, product in terms of a service that you're offering or whatever it may be, doesn't mean people are going to flock to you. It's just not what's going to happen.
Because I just heard you mention asking for referrals, right? you know of anybody else, or you know this leader here. So I've heard, we even us personally, just the experience of asking for referrals has been hit or miss. So you think it's pretty successful?
I think so. I mean, I built my success on that, and I've raised millions of dollars over the course of my career. And I think it's also knowing who you're talking to too, because some people be very receptive to that and say, no, absolutely. You know, you need to talk to Bob over here because we're just having this conversation on my deck or on the golf course or wherever. And I said, yeah, because this is what we're trying to do. And, you know, we need your help and others in this community. And I want that. Other ways that we did it is advisory boards, things like that. You know, a lot of people are on boards for a reason. And there's nothing wrong with that. It helps build that affinity to what you're doing. They start to get invested. They start to understand what you're trying to do. So that was one of the reasons I did what I did from that standpoint.
So getting back to Revo Cup, how did the opportunity present itself for you to open your own shop? Was there some sort of franchising program?
So, yeah, when we started and we you know, after my wife and I sat down and kind of talked through this, I went back and said, hey, what do you think it would take to open up another coffee shop? This is what I'm thinking about doing. And he said, well, actually, I want to do this because I know that the more stores that are open, the bigger impact we can have for the foundation. And I'm like, all right, well, what is that going to take? And he goes, well, I need your help. You know, he was like, I don't really know. I know I want to do it, but I don't know how to do it.
So he only had one location at that time.
He only had one location.
This was 10 years ago.
Yeah, 10 years ago. So it was just him by himself. And I'm like, okay, well, I can help do that. And I said, well, what do we want to do? And so we're going the difference between a franchise, and we're talking about the difference between that and a license agreement. License agreements are where you don't have SEC rules when you go across state lines. There's a lot of benefit to doing it that way. So we ultimately decided to go with a license agreement. And so between the two of us, we kind of built out the plan. This is what we're thinking about doing. This is how we're thinking about doing it. And he goes, and by the way, Michael, you don't have to pay that because you're the guinea pig. And I go, oh, I kind of like that. So, and so for me, it worked out really well. But it also, there was times that I'm like, hey, I need beans. And he goes, yeah, I don't have any. I'm like, yeah, I need beans to run a coffee shop. So what can we do here? And so, you know, learning some of those lessons, him gearing up just for one extra store, understanding, oh, you know, hey, I need you to bill me more often. You know, it's great to be in a position where my cash balance keeps going up. But, you know, when you send me a bill every 6 months for coffee, you know, it's like I'm smart enough and wise enough to keep that money in my bank account and not spend it. If you bring someone else on, they may not.
Yeah.
I said, you need to figure out ways to change that a little bit. Oh, I'm going to text you all my orders, you know, so how can we streamline some of those things? So there's a lot of that kind of came out of it. And, you know, ultimately I didn't have to pay, but then I worked with everyone else. And the part of my role was director of operations is to kind of help them get going, help them find contractors, help them find architects, help them through the system. Because one thing Opti didn't do a good job with me was, here's all the license you need. You know, so I opened in December of 2015. And so when I did that, I didn't realize in the state of Kansas, you had to file a form that basically says you're still in business. And you have to do that every year in January. Yeah. So I was open a month. And I'm like, already filled out the form. I thought, oh, on my year anniversary. So around March or April on a busy day, they come in and they say, hey, I hate to do this, but we're going to have to close you down. I'm like, wait, what? I go, why? Well, you're not a business anymore because you never filed that form. I'm like, I'll do it right now. And luckily, the lady was nice. She goes, I can see you've only been open a few months. I hate to do this. If you do it right now, I can call my boss and tell him what you're doing. So I had to physically go and reapply for my business, the name, everything. So I ended up spending, instead of $50, I ended up spending like $400 or $500 for this air. And things have changed, I think, since then. But yeah, it was not fun. So,
wow, yeah, I've had many of those. It's funny because you try to really prepare yourself to open a business, but especially with governmental permits and regulation, et cetera, you can't catch it all, and it's only over time that you get this painful experience that you never forget it again.
Right. And that's thanks to my iPhone, because from that point forward, I put it on my phone as a reminder to make sure I did it every year from that point forward.
Does the health department have to go in the coffee shop? Yeah. There it is. Yeah.
And the nice thing is that's the one who actually came in the coffee shop to close me.
Yeah.
And she was actually very nice and has been. And so, when I sold my part of the business and I'm selling it currently to the new owner, when she came in, she still had to do an initial inspection. She goes, if you do everything that Michael did, you'll be fine, because I've never had a problem.
Nice.
And she knows that. You try to prod her and say, oh, give me some places not to go. She goes, I can't do that. Just go online. But she goes, there's definitely some restaurants I would never step foot in Kansas City, in Overland Park. I'm like, oh, tell me. Just whisper it. Anyway.
There's a lot to just treating these government employees with respect and, Christ-like. Yeah. And it's just smart anyways, because they're the ones who are holding your business's future in their hands.
Yeah.
Whether we like that or not.
Exactly.
But I mean, just another example of just being Christ-like, even in moments where we don't want to be. We had an after-school program, and then we just for a short amount of time, and we had to deal with the health department. That was not fun.
Yeah.
They were always coming in, finding all the little tiny things. I mean, just a scratch in the wall.
Yeah.
They said, oh, you got to repair that, or we're going to write you up and fine you. But it just came to a point where, you know what? We're going to keep doing what we do, and let the daycares do what they do. Right,
exactly. They're really good at it.
So the first year running that business, how'd that go?
I mean, I'll start with the first month, and so my projections were way off. So I made $6,000 total the first year or first month.
Well, what'd you project?
I was hoping I did at least 9,000 or 10,000 that first month. And because it was December, you got Christmas gifts, you got coffee beans, you got family, you got everything happening. I'm like, oh, this is going to be, again, I'm glad my wife is working right now because we got some bills. But over time, it started to grow, and it was growing in part because I think because of the way Christ was moving through that store. And I went into it, even the architect was Christian, even the builder was Christian, and my neighbors are Christian, and they're attorneys, and I would visit with them about things that we're struggling with. The landlord was Christian, and it was like I didn't plan all that out. That's how God was moving at that moment in time, and how He moved us into that place. And for me, that first year was a lot of rewarding, kind of long hours, and that, which is what happens when you start your own business, especially a small business. You don't pay yourself, and I didn't pay myself for several years, to be honest with you. And it was just because that's not what my goal was. I was in a healthy place financially, so I didn't need to worry about that aspect. I needed to worry about my employees and making sure they were taken care of, treating them with respect and building them up and helping encourage them. I needed to make my employees feel good. If we messed on something, it was easier to give stuff away instead of like cutting back. I've known so many stores that go in and they give a lot and then they start cutting back. I said, I don't want to be in that place. I don't want to be in a place where I have to start cutting back because financially I can't handle it. And so for me, it was rewarding and to be able to do that and to be able to have open conversations with customers about anything and everything. I wanted it to be a welcoming place, and I think we did that. And we did that through the people I hired. And to coffee shops, the average person lasts about a year to a year and a half, sometimes even less than that. I have one person that works for me. She's been there almost from day one, and she's still there. I have another girl that's been there 6 years. I have another girl that she's been there now 2.5 years. So most of my people stay a long time. And I'm not saying it's me, but I think there's a combination. I make it a friendly place, to work. So you had to adapt and treat each employee differently. And so that was part of the experience. And, some of my employees are Christian, some aren't. And so, but the ones that aren't hear me have conversations with customers about God, or they see a Bible study, or someone will come up and just randomly go up to this one person in particular and say, hey, how can I pray for you today? And it's like, she's like, huh? And I would be a guy saying that to her, and she was fine with it because she knew he was a pastor. She goes, oh, well, that's just him being him. But then this other lady came up and said the same thing to her. And she goes, "Man, I don't believe that stuff." And, but I see her life changing slowly through interactions with me, interactions with other employees, and starting to soften a little bit. She grew up in a world that it was very dark. And even though her Christian parents treated her, with a lot of disrespect, part of it is her life choices and the way she was living her life and things along that sort. But rather than love, they just threw things at her. But then I have another person that's a Christian, and she talks about how she lived in an authoritative type of environment with her parents. And I'm like, dang. So you hear these stories and it makes you realize I need to talk to them more. With that one employee whose parents were like that, she came to me one day and said, you're the first Christian I know that doesn't judge me. And I'm like, wow, that's powerful. You think about that. You think about our testimony should be that. It shouldn't be judging. It should be talking to them, meeting them where they're at, visiting with them and talking to them. And she did come up to me and say, "Hey, you gonna be proud of me?" I go, "Oh, yes." I'm getting excited. I'm like, "Yeah, what?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm exploring God." I'm like, "Okay, what does that mean?" She goes, "Well, I'm starting with, witches and Wiccan and things like that." And I'm like, "Oh." But then I'm like, "Okay." I said, "All right, leave it where it's at." I said, "But I hope that you include Christianity in your journey."
Yeah.
And I said, "Don't be tainted by the people who you feel like treated you wrong." I said, "I want you to start to look at it in earnest, not just, oh, I'll do it because Michael said." It was, and so the cool thing is now she's meeting and visiting with another one of my employees who's on fire for God, and they're becoming friends. And then she's telling her about God in really just very small ways, random small ways, and just meeting her where she's at. And I think that's what she needs. She just needs people to treat her with respect, and she's more willing to listen. So that first year from there to where we are today is continued to evolve and change. And I've learned a lot. And I learned a lot from my sales world to the nonprofit world to really living my faith on my sleeve on a regular basis. Yeah. We had people that say, "Is this a Christian coffee shop?" And so, again, I want to be welcoming to everyone. And my employee handled it the best possible way. She said, "No, but the owner is." I said, "That's what I want to be known for."
Yes.
So if you walk in and you're not a Christian, you still feel like you belong. You will look around and see plenty of Bible studies happening, or you will hear those conversations around you. And even if that's a little water drop that lands in your head, like, I heard something about God over here. I have plenty of those stories. And I've seen that happen over the years of people that could care less about God or were treated disrespectfully in their mind by the church, and having some conversations with them. And I may never see the fruition of that conversation, but I know I'm at least pushing them in the right direction.
Yeah. The thing that really stood out to me with what you said, with what she said, is so common is, I can't be a Christian because of how that Christian treated me or how that Christian person is behaving. But I think it's important for every person to evaluate Christianity based on the root of how it formed. What is the foundation of Christianity? Well, it's Jesus Christ. Well, how do we learn about Jesus Christ? The Bible is a historical fact of Jesus Christ, not the people who are trying to follow the religion.
Right.
Leave it up to people to screw up a religion, because we always do. So it's so interesting that when people are looking into Buddhism or whatever it may be, they look at Buddha. But when it's time to look at Christianity, they look at people. Instead of the Bible or Jesus Christ too. I mean, it's irrefutable that Jesus Christ existed.
Right.
He existed, right?
Plenty of evidence.
Yeah. So that always rings a bell for me. It's just, you got to go to the root and really evaluate it make your decision based on that.
Yeah, because you said something very similar to what I say on a regular basis, even to non-Christians. So whenever man gets involved in anything, he messes it up.
Yes.
So whenever we start to put rules and regulations in around religion,
Right.
We're not going to church to be part of a religion. We're going in to be part of a relationship with Christ.
Yes.
And that's the
glorify
ultimate.
God.
Yes.
And have that relationship. Yes. To be with his people. So with the incredible retention rate you have with your employees, what's the secret? And specifically, how do you hold them accountable if you're making it such a friendly place?
Well, I know. And it's interesting. So the new owner is kind of dealing with this and trying to understand it. I said, in the store, I gave my employees permission to make fun of me all day long. I said, you can laugh, you can joke, you can make fun of me as long as you're not serious. Like if you're saying something seriously, like, okay, you're on a borderline here. But what ultimately happened is that, especially the young ladies that work for me, young as we're going from 40 down to 21, but they said, oh, is this your daughter? It got to that kind of relationship. And some of them even say, you're like my dad, because you're nicer to me than my dad. Yeah. And they start to build, you start to build relationships and you start to build friendships. But I always told them, I said, my dad voice, and then my boss voice. I said, if I want you to do it, you're going to know that I want you to do something. And if you're not doing something, I'm going to talk to you about it. And what I did is I had a policy in place that if it's a one-off, I'm not going to worry about it. But if it happens 2 or 3 times, I'm going to come and say, hey, I've noticed this trend. Everyone makes mistakes. And I let them kind of have those mistakes. Everyone kind of, I didn't mop today, because it looked clean, out in the customer area. I'm like, okay, well, I'll look at it, go, you forgot once. Okay. Or you chose not to. Yeah, whatever. They still did behind the bar. They still did bathrooms, still did everything but that one little area. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to worry about it. So I didn't nitpick. I talked to one guy, he goes, I went into the bathroom and there's this one water spot on the mirror and it was there for a week. What should I do? I said, wipe it off. I'm like, at the end of the day, it's your business too. Yeah. Okay, so they didn't use Windex every single time on the mirror. You want it to be clean. And if I'm looking at it, if it was something gross hanging there, get on them. But it's a water spot and you're worried about that? I would think opposite. I thought opposite of that. I'm like, I want to encourage and build up and say, hey, what do you want to learn about coffee? I'd help them understand. They would hear me talk with customers. I was a hands-on kind of owner operator, so I was always there. If they needed to take a
even when we first met, every time I came, you were there.
Yeah,
you were there every single
7
time.
days a week.
Yes,
so that's
even
one
on Sundays.
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons why I retired. So 7 days a week for almost 9 years is like, it was a long process.
Yeah,
but it's fulfilling, and I loved it. So, and I still love it. I'm still there almost every day. But it is what it is. So you work hard, but you encourage them to make fun of me, and they did, and customers laugh because they know that I do. And then I do that with my customers too. I have one guy who's been coming in prior to his brother, him would meet there. Brother ended up passing away. He kept coming. And then his wife ended up getting sick, kept coming every single day. And then his wife ended up passing. And now he comes in. And what he wants is the banter. He just wants someone he can, because he's an extremely intelligent man. He's an engineer, retired, and no one can keep up with him in his mind. So I just throw it. I play, if this is the right word, I don't know, devil's advocate. Everything he says is like, oh, where'd you read that? On the internet. Oh, what about this? Oh, because you're old. We know that. So, and here I am old anyway. So, and then he'll say, well, you're fat. And I said, yeah, I invest a lot in this stomach, but let's talk about you. And so he loved just going back and forth. And so that's what we try to do. And he's to this day, he'll sit down and visit with me, and he just needs that conversation.
Yeah. I just love hearing or just thinking about how many different relationships you've built over the years of just owning a coffee shop.
Yeah.
It's almost like you had to become a psychologist.
Yeah.
Or a therapist.
Yeah.
Counselor. And you're also selling coffee.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, it's like a non-alcoholic version of Cheers.
Cheers, I know. Exactly. I don't know if I'm Sam. I'm not good enough looking. I'm probably like Norm, who sits on a chair somewhere. But no, I agree. And that's, the original founder told me, he goes, be careful, because what you're going to experience is something you've never experienced before. You're going to see people at their purest. and they're going to share things with you like you've never had shared with you before. I mean, from the joys of getting married to having their first child to retiring to losing a loved one and it breaks your heart. I mean, you're just like, wow. This one guy that was a phenomenal mainstay of our store passed away recently, and just going to his funeral, it was a group of Revel Cup customers that actually went there too because they knew him.
Oh my goodness.
And I said, you become family in a way that's a little bit different. And that's what I think we try to do. It's not transactional based. I had one employee complain because he wasn't getting tips, because we all like to tip, right? And he goes, well, I'm not getting tips because I'm not a girl. And I'm like, what? I go, help me understand that. And he goes, no, look over here. She's an attractive young lady getting tips all the time. I said, but you know what else she does? She knows they just got back from vacation. She knows her kids are doing this and this. She knows who her spouse or what their spouse's name is. She knows that the activities the kids are involved in. She's building relationship. Every time you come in, you talk about you. Every time you come in, you talk about golf. And he goes, well, there's nothing wrong with that. I go, it's Frisbee golf. It's not golf. And then, I'm making fun of that because that is a sport, but he never qualified it as calling it disc golf. I said, so some guy says, oh, I'm going golfing. And you say, so am I. Where are you going? Oh, well, I'm going to wherever he went, Swope or wherever he played. And the guy goes, wait, what? And he goes, yeah, it's disc golf. And the guy goes, oh. And he kind of, confused. I'm like, know your audience, know who you're talking to, figure these things out.
Bingo.
And I said, and you know what? People start to tip appropriately because during COVID, we had people who were giving huge amounts of tips because they knew the employees were getting hit hard financially.
Yeah.
So we have a customer base that became friends and became family, and they supported each other. And that's the environment that we want. The original story had a couple that got married. They met at the coffee shop. And they said that was their first date. And they came and they said, we want to buy this table in this corner to take home. And he said, what? Why? He goes, that was where our first date was. He goes, well, I'm not going to do that. But, and I probably would have. I would be like, okay, just give me enough to buy another one. But they wanted that. And he goes, but instead, when they did the driving around, taking pictures of all the places that they needed to be or where they wanted it to be, they stopped in. She was in her wedding dress. He was in his tux. They went over in the corner, reenacted their first date, and then moved on. So that's the impact that a coffee shop, any coffee shop, if you invest in your customers, can actually become something more than just a transactional-based environment.
So much truth that you just said. The first one is not making it about you and learning about the other person who's talking to you. That is such a lost art. And I think a lot of this is just going back to the increasing narcissism that's coming from social media.
Right.
But just when you're having that conversation, I at least try to look through the eyes of the other person, to be almost in the body of the other person so that I can think like them and then tailor the conversation to them.
Right.
And it's interesting. The second part of this is, unfortunately, your guy had a fixed mindset.
Yeah.
The fixed mindset is blaming external factors that are unchangeable because what's the cause of the current circumstances. So I'm blaming that thing because of what's happening now. But instead, it should be, what could I be changing? What could I change in order to get a better outcome?
And to be resistant to even suggestions to help them.
Oh, that's the worst.
Yeah.
The worst is fixed mindset without humility.
So he ultimately changed jobs. Clearly, he wasn't successful here, and he went to work for his mom because his mom could at least put up with
that. Might
everything.
Have been the cause.
Who knows?
That might have been the root cause there. I can't imagine how many people you've met, but that is just amazing to hear. So how are you continuing to further God's kingdom now as you're kind of exiting the entrepreneur seat?
So that one's been an interesting transition. So July of last year to today, part of it, the first couple of months, I just did a complete binge watching of Netflix just to stop because I had worked so hard for so long. And I said, I just need to relax for a moment. But then I started going back. I still have customer bases that, people who know me, and the new owner needed help because there's a lot of things he didn't understand. The employees, I had one employee who just started work for us who said if she had known I was selling, she's not sure that she would have come there. Now she's still there, so it's a good fit. But she goes, I came in part to work for you because I saw the environment that you're building. So I'm helping him through that process, helping him understand what he can and can't do. And then and talking to him about his faith. Where is he in this process, and what does he understand? And, he's a relatively young man, but he's still struggling with a lot of younger people. I see this where they identified initially as, instead of saying I'm Christian, I'm Baptist, I'm this, I'm that a denomination as opposed to Christian. And I'm not saying that identifying as a Christian is necessarily the perfect answer either, but he's at a point in his life where he's reevaluating, why do I say I am that anyway? And I run into a lot of people that are in that boat. And the main people are going to be those 20-year-olds, those early 30-year-olds that are really in that place. They're transitioning from mom and dad's faith, if they even went to church, to their own personal faith. So with organizations, I volunteer, and one I haven't done a great job with yet, but locally there's KC Underground. KC Underground has Awaken KC, which is geared toward 20-year-olds. And he basically said, young people need old people. And he goes, I don't mean to offend you, but you're old. And they need to talk to old people. And he goes, it's kind of weird, but they understand and appreciate the honesty that you're bringing to the table. And so for me, that gives me the opportunity to visit with people beyond what I'm doing in the coffee shop. I still randomly start talking to people at the coffee shop. I still visit with them. I still go up and start to say, hey, you look sad. What's going on in your life? And people who have never been there start to see a little bit different side of the coffee shop. And the ones that have been there a while know that, the tall tale sign to don't talk to me, because Michael talks to everyone, is to put your earbuds in or put your headphones on. And they make a point of like, yep, I'm working now. Don't talk to me. But I think having conversation, meeting people where they are, and then going beyond my little four walls that I was in for such a long time at the coffee shop and starting to build out across the city, visiting with people and asking them questions. To be honest with you, I have a little handmade sign that I wrote, need a prayer. And I would set it as I'm having lunch somewhere, just randomly, not like in your face. Set it there, eat my lunch, and some people look at it, move on. I've had people say, "Oh, interesting," walk on. And to be honest, no one's ever sat down with me and said, "I want to talk to you about that." But if nothing else, my goal is think about God, think about what's going on in this world. Do something different. Again, the coffee shops affords me the opportunity to do that. As I step further and further away, I don't have the same influence with the employees anymore. They come to me still a little bit, and I'm like, go talk to him because I don't want to cause a rift there. Yeah. But customers, that come in just randomly having questions, or people come back and say, oh, I'm so glad you're here because I have a story to share. And talking about college life and some of the challenges that they had in college, and having those conversations with them, and knowing that they know that I'm coming at it from a different standpoint, talking about what you said earlier, being that psychologist or the psychiatrist or the therapist or whatever, but they're coming to share good news and things that are happening in their life, and the boyfriend that they just met that actually, he's Christian. Oh, I'm excited. Those types of conversations.
Yeah. I don't know if you've experienced this, but I know I have, is even with us, we have people coming in 2 or 3 times a week for years. Mm-hmm. And you get to know the student, the child, and the parent, but then they end up leaving. They always do, right? Yeah. Even for us, they have to. They move on. I remember, like in my earlier years, that was so difficult. Yeah. Because you build these relationships with these people, but it's still a business transaction, right? And eventually they leave. So have you felt that
all the time? Yeah. I mean, people who do. You think about just life in general, and probably like yours as well. It's not because of service. Just, hey, I'm moving to North Kansas City. I'm not going to drive all the way down here. It's people who move to another state. Life circumstances have changed. I had one lady who's been coming in for years. And I said something to her, because she has wonderful boys and they're great people. And I said something to her and she goes, yeah, I just got divorced. And she, again, shares her story a little bit, but you're like, oh, well, you're still coming. That means your husband's probably not anymore. You're her ex-husband now. So you see these transitions or the ones, like I said, who got married, but then moved. Oh, we moved down to Springfield. We'll be up randomly, or I'm going to college. These young kids that are going away to college. Yes, I'll be back next summer.
Yes.
It was hard because you're like, I invest so much. It feels like anyway. And you're like, you're my friend. And now you're moving away. What's going on?
Yes. Yeah, it's just part of the game, part of the business. But other than the Bible, has there been any book that's been a huge impact on your professional career?
And, and it's funny. So, within that, obviously, we do say the Bible, right? Because it's kind of how I kind of started really following my faith a little bit more closer. It helped, start that process. So that's a given, obviously, based on our conversation. But it's the one book when you're suggesting what is it, I looked at, and it's a funny book, and I don't know how many it sold. It was 200 pages long, and it's called Show Then Tell. And it is a Christian book. It was a guy that ran a business for 40 plus years, an entrepreneur, did a whole bunch of stuff. He retired. But the book came out, I don't know, I can't even remember. Let's say it was 25, 30 years ago. And I read that, and it, in part, it started to make sense to me. For me, it was living our faith in a way that others will see God and then say, why are you different? Mm-hmm. So my life was, as I said, it was starting to evolve and starting to change. Maybe that may have been one of the first books that I read that started to have me think about my faith and really where I was living. And I wasn't ready for the book. And when you asked, I actually reordered it because I can't find it because I want to reread it now. But it was talking about living your faith where you're showing the world that you're a Christian in a way that isn't in your face. I'm not sitting there pounding a Bible on their head. I'm not hitting them in the head with a 2x4 saying you're an idiot. I'm not doing all those things. I'm not standing on a street corner. I'm not doing those things. I'm just living my life in a way that glorifies God in everything that I do. And then if I do that, the hope is that someone is going to come to you and say, tell me more. Mm-hmm. So like the one employee that I was talking about, she felt comfortable enough sharing with me that she's on some journey, whatever it is. It's because she knows how I live. I don't sit there and have deep conversations about Christianity with her, right, but she knows where I live.
And she knows where you stand, though.
Yeah. And I make it a point. I go, you need to understand that if you ask me what I believe, I'm going to tell you what I believe. Now, I'm not going to sit there and say you're doing it wrong, but I'm going to tell you what I believe and what I believe is right and why I believe it's right. So
I need to check that one out. Sounds like a great book. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
This has been extremely fruitful for me, and I know for our listeners. So thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.